the stratigraphy of the walls that we're looking at today.
The whography, what did you say?
Stratigraphy.
Stratigraphy, right. That's a new one on me. I mean, obviously this wouldn't have been going in either of your lifetimes, I would imagine.
You don't have to imagine, right, Joe, that's correct.
I followed here, they come in all shades of colours. You get brown ones, black ones, spotted ones. But these are unique, they're white.
Always white?
They're always white.
Always.
He records about hearing of a witch in the area at one time. I mean, there's everything goes down into that diary. One sad footnote is that he also recorded when he would clip his toenails.
The man who gave his name to the place that I'm in today became, in the early years of the 17th century, one of the biggest landowners there has ever been in Ireland. Between the years 1603 and 1627, he managed to get his hands on some 25,000 acres, spread over 8 different counties. It was said that you could travel from the northwest corner of Lough Neagh all the way down to the fringes of the Pale around Dublin without ever stepping off his land. And yet, it's a little village in the Tyrone countryside that bears his name. Mind you, if he were around today, he might not recognise it as his name, because local people simply refer to it as Coffel. Welcome to Castle Caulfield in the ancient parish of Donaghmore in the county of Tyrone. Captain Toby Caulfield was a soldier of fortune, originally from Oxfordshire, who found favour in the 9 Years' War as one of Mountjoy's chief enforcers. As a reward for his services in the early 1600s, which included holding Fort Charlemont on the River Blackwater against any would-be advances of O'Neill's forces, he was later dubbed Lord Caulfield, 1st Baron of Charlemont. On the 1,000 acres of Ballydonnelly land that he was granted in these parts, he built his castle on what used to be thought the site of the old O'Donnelly fort, and also the requisite village nearby, initially housing 15 planter families providing 20 men-at-arms. Neither shape nor stone of that period is to be seen in the busy main street of modern Castle Caulfield, which owes much of its character to the dominance of the 19th century linen trade, as well as the big house influence of Parkinore, ancestral pile of the Burgess family, landlords here since the late 1700s. But by far the oldest building in the village, bar the castle, and still in continuous use since it was built between 1681 and 1685, is St Michael's Church of Ireland, wherein is laid the body of the Reverend George Walker, hero of the Siege of Derry, killed at the Battle of the Boyne, and interred here in his original parish of Donaghmore many years later. Castle Caulfield has a complex history, in ways a microcosm of the wider Ulster canvas, but we'll begin back at that picturesque ruin which gives the village its name. Maybelline Gormley of the Northern Ireland Environment Agency and Dr. Colm Donnelly of Queen's University are archaeologists who've carried out recent excavations of the castle, which would have looked something like this when it was first built. There are a few surprises here. The thing that surprises me, and maybe other people who don't know as much about castles as you people do, is that it had a pitched roof as well. Yeah. I mean, I was picturing that being, I don't know what I was picturing, it sort of little castellations, but all these castles had proper roofs on them.
Oh, definitely.
See, I think one of the things you're looking at here is Sir Toby Caulfield is from originally Oxfordshire.
Right.
So he comes across here and he's building in the style that someone who was a major landowner in England would have built in. Yes. So he calls it Castle Caulfield. Right. Really what you're looking at is an English style manor house.
It's a manor house, really, isn't that the case? And was all of this, we talked about it being built, or finished around 1620 or 1619, something like that. Was all of that built at once, or were there bits added on in later years?
No, it seems to be all been one build.
Right.
One construction.
Right.
It was burnt very badly in the 1641 rebellion, and then it would have been repaired. And then it was occupied again until about the 1660s.
Right.
And one of the ongoing research elements of this project is that we're still trying to understand the stratigraphy of the walls that we're looking at today.
The hography, what did you say?
Stratigraphy.
Stratigraphy, right. That's a new one on me. What does that mean? Why they were built the way they were built, sort of thing, more or less?
Yes, and the different phases of build,
Right.
and the story of the phases of build that can be seen in the walls today.
And where we're standing now, there's a bit missing, isn't that the case? Just over here to our left. So we're roughly about here somewhere, is that
Indeed.
Yeah.
Originally it would have been a U-shaped structure,
Right.
but this wing of the building is now lost.
Right. So the castle here wasn't simply like for defensive purposes, it was to
No.
proclaim his importance as well.
It's
Is that
a
the
status
case?
symbol.
Absolutely, and you can tell that from the detailing of the castle, the sort of large grand windows and the beautifully carved string courses
Right.
and mouldings.
So for its day, this was a grand
This was
place.
a really important centre of operations for a really important person.
For all its grandeur of design, the castle had a relatively short span as a habitable building, having been completely abandoned after 1690. But even when it was burnt in 1641 and only partially restored, it continued to play a role in the turbulent and complicated religious politics of 17th century Ireland. In 1670, the new Catholic Archbishop of Armagh, Oliver Plunkett, conducted a mass confirmation service in the grounds of the castle with the full sanction of the 5th Baron Charlemont. And later again, in the 1780s, the First Presbyterian congregation used to meet in the barn of the ruined castle before they were able to build their own church in the village main street. And even nowadays, the castle continues to have its uses. The excavation you had a great brilliant idea of involving as many local school kids as possible. And
Well,
this bloodthirsty looking poster derives from that, isn't that the case? You were involved in the local school children?
indeed, well, what we've done over the past 3 years at Castle Caulfield is to try and engage the local community.
Aye.
Because it's a fabulous site. The monument is in state care and it has been in state care since 1938. But as you can see, it's sort of a site that people live beside but don't really pass much marks on. So one of the aims of NIA is to try and engage with local communities and try and foster ownership.
A sense of this
sense-
is ours and we'll take a bit of pride in it and things
Absolutely,
like that.
because it is definitely something to have pride in, such a fabulous structure on your doorstep.
Well, how did you? I mean, did you actually have children? I mean, at your dig with all the wee
Yep.
trials, doing all the time
Yep.
stuff as well.
We basically want to try and use this as a template for going to other areas
And doing similar
doing
projects.
the same thing. Yeah.
Right.
Involving the local community and
I think it's a
involving the
great
school
idea,
kids.
because I mean, archaeology in the past has always been seen as a kind
Yeah.
of an elitist
Yeah.
trade, as it were.
But it's not.
It's not at all.
It's about local people and their local heritage and becoming interested and passionate about it.
And you learn new words every time you do it. Like I learned a new word today.
Stratigraphy.
I can't even say it if I can understand it. Stratigraphy, yes. So well done, Frankie Abernethy of Blessed Patrick O'Loughlin Primary School. You're either going to be an artist, an archaeologist, or a maker of horror films when you grow up. In certain lights, this might be the right kind of setting for such a film. The gardens and the main house of Parkinore Estate. There's even a ghostly-looking herd of very special white fallow deer, and some mightily impressive giants in the Arboretum. But for a real Grimm's fairy tale setting, you have to go to the Fagus sylvatica contorta. There are some magnificent and exotic specimens in the Arboretum here, but for me, the two most eye-catching trees are these. They're known as parasol beeches, and they have these wonderfully corkscrewed trunk and branches, and the outer twigs form a kind of canopy, hence the name parasol. Now you might think it an odd place to plant two such trees underneath the spreading arms of this ancient oak tree, but the truth is that these were planted before the oak tree grew, so they are in fact much older. Older again, in terms of pedigree at least, is the herd of white fallow deer at Parkinore, the only one of its kind in Ireland. Older even than the castle that Toby Caulfield built here in the early 1600s. Alec Barclay is one of a kind as well. Not that he has the only white beard in the Forest Service, but no one else has the job of looking after a herd like this.
The history of them, I suppose, is really that they can trace themselves back again to Mallow and Cork.
Is that where they originated?
That's where they originated, that's where they came from, Joe.
Right.
And then Queen Elizabeth I in 1597,
Right.
she gave a pair of those deer to our goddaughter for a wedding present.
Yes.
And a few hundred years later, Joe,
You have herds now.
in
So
19
they're all descended from the same.
they're all
that
descended.
one
They're all
pair.
descended from that one herd in Mallow.
Good Lord. Right.
Then in 1978, the Forest Service went down to Mallow
Aye.
and purchased 5. 2 bucks and 3 does, and brought them back here to Parkinore Forest.
So you've what have I heard? What about 20 odds now or something?
20 to 25 deer.
And it stays roughly that. Is that the optimum number for you for this place here? To
Aye, I'll tell you
support?
why, Joe, is because we have about 20 acres here in the enclosure.
Aye.
It's a penned area.
Right.
But the unique thing about this park, Joe, is that it's open to the public.
Right.
And I mean, when we come in there, the slip gates on,
Aye.
so the public can wander through it.
So they're not. You're not afraid of the deer either doing any harm to the public or vice versa.
No, they've been never known to attack anyone. They have to be treated with respect,
Yes.
particularly during the cull.
Right.
And the cull is in October and November.
Right. Would they have a rutting season the same as the red deer would have? Yeah.
They have the exact same thing, yes, a rutting
Are you not
season.
advised to stay well clear of them at that
You're advised to
time?
treat them with respect. Yep.
I was looking up the word fallow. I remember telling you this earlier on. I'm looking at the word fallow, and the word fallow comes from an old English word meaning reddish brown.
Reddish brown.
Reddish brown, and that would be the colour of the wee fawns.
That's the colour of the wee fawns.
Right. So do you call them a white fallow haired? It's almost like a contradiction. Almost.
It is
isn't
almost like a
You think-
contradiction,
You
Joe.
think about it.
I fallow deer, they come in all shades of colours. You can have brown ones, black ones, spotted ones.
Really?
But these are unique, they are white.
Always white.
They're always white.
Always white. And nearly always the first thing children look for on a visit to Parkinore. But there's much more to look for here, including, when we come back, a story of extraordinary generosity that has made Parkinore the kind of place that it is today. When John Einar Burgess married Lady Caroline Clements, daughter of Lord Leitrim, in 1833, he brought enough money to the family to keep the estate going. And when his aunt, Lady Margaret Powlett, left her fortune to him in 1838, he could afford to engage the services of Newry architect Thomas Duff to build the mock Tudor west wing in similar style to Norrawater Castle, which Duff also designed. Parkinore today is an amalgam of different builds and different periods by different members of the Burgess family. But they've not owned any of it since 1958, since when Parkinore has played a very different role in society. I'm indebted to local historian Jonathan Gray for most of what I know about Castle Caulfield and Parkinore. And Jonathan has made a study of the enormous influence the Burgess landlords would have wielded, for good or ill, over the surrounding population throughout the 19th and indeed well into the 20th century.
Basically, as the way in a modern industrial era where a factory would become the mainstay for the local community, this estate in the older times was the mainstay for the local community. And quite a number of people would have worked here. Even up until relatively recent times, there was maybe about 19 or 20 people on the staff. And then 1914, really the first war and after, that things started to collapse. But no, I mean, they relied upon it when the famine arrived. 1847 was the worst year here. Lady Caroline sold her coach and horses to fund a kitchen on the estate for the wider workforce in their families.
So they had the sense of
maintain them.
responsibility. Would that be fair to say?
She built 2 schools on the very grounds here.
So I mean, really, their role was, we would describe it these days as paternalistic, but they would have seen it as being responsible for the welfare of people as well as their own standing in the community.
I mean, it'd be wrong to get caught up in that. It's a very sort of almost romantic role of patronage. It's a mixture of the two. It's a common sense awareness that if you don't maintain a happy and well-grounded tenantry, your income won't happen. But at the same time, I think they did feel a great sense of responsibility. I mean, they weren't immune to tragedy. She lost 3 sons all before the age of 12 here in this house. So she was more than aware of personal loss, which would have been suffered by many families during the hard time.
But the other thing to say that it was as a result of the famine, not directly in terms of people actually dying as a result of either starvation or disease, but as a result of the aftermath of the famine.
Yeah.
They were decimated here, really.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he records very firmly in his archives that despite all his best efforts, 300 of his tenants decided to pack their bags for America, Australia, New Zealand. And I mean, that is the big marker on the population here. Population locally dropped 37% between 1841 and 1871. And that wasn't through death through cholera, typhus, or even directly through the famine. It was people here just basically decided it's too hard and we're tired.
It's fair to say that the other side of all the if you like, the benefactor role that they played to some extent, the other side of that one would have been a very patrician role, where they wanted to maintain the distinction of the classes and all the rest of it. Very much so.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you never left in any doubt that they did see themselves as a class above. You know, I don't think that I never got the perception that ever changed, but they felt that carried a responsibility with it, which was a responsibility to society. But it's funny, the family did make that connection between the classes actually themselves personally. John Henry Burgess, who lived here up until about 1909 or whatever it was, ended up marrying his housekeeper, Mary Pierce, from London. Now, Mary was...
That would have been unthinkable
50 years earlier,
he
was shunned by society, by, high society. And nobody visited the house during that time that they were married and he was still alive. She was a Roman Catholic. She was from Donaghmore, as far as we can work out. But it was very much a romantic arrangement. They met. He had actually brought her out on the grand tour with him. And they fell in love. He was a widower. But the children reacted badly to it, as can happen in these situations. But they lived happily here until he died. And sadly, Mary disappeared and we never found out where she went. But I mean, the descendants record that despite the way they reacted at the time, it was a loving marriage and a very honest and, a nice one, romantic.
A happy outcome
absolutely,
for them, at least,
absolutely,
anyway.
yeah.
Jonathan, I can assure you, has a wealth of Parkinore stories. Some bittersweet, like the one you've just heard, some tragic, and quite a few hilarious as well. But tempus fugit, so we have to jump ahead to 1958 and a story of simple but extraordinary generosity. When Thomas Doran, a local man who had made his fortune in America selling greetings cards, returned home, bought what remained of the estate, and gave it outright to his friend, the local Presbyterian minister, the Reverend Jerry Aikens. He did so because the Reverend Aikens' son Stanley had cerebral palsy, and his father saw the need to set up some kind of educational facility for adults requiring specialist training like his son. Since then, the Thomas Doran Training Centre has been providing just such a service. And although nowadays partly funded by the Wellings and various other functions run at Parkinore, Chief Executive Wilfred Mitchell will tell you that it still owes its existence to Thomas Doran's generosity back in 1958.
I'm not sure if he even had told the Reverend Aiken that he had bought it.
He bought it.
So, I think they bought it in 1958 and then it actually opened its doors in 1960.
Right.
So there's a lot of refurbishment and things to be done.
So he hands this over to Reverend Aiken and says, there you are, there's your premises.
That's right.
Now obviously he must at that stage have thought, this is not just for Stanley, this is obviously for a much bigger enterprise than that. Not the case,
Yeah. Well, I had to do a lot of lobbying, be the equivalent today to the Department of Employment and Learning. I think it was Manpower Services. So he got them to help fund students to come here on a residential basis. So that was the start of it. And today we're the only specialist for the education college in Northern Ireland.
Right.
There's about 70 between England and Wales, but we're the only one in Northern Ireland.
The only one offering the kind of residential education.
So we're offering support for people with physical, learning and emotional disabilities.
It's not so much that Parkinore's days of privilege are gone. It's more the case that privilege has now been extended to others who want to see what it's like to live here, work here and visit. It's certainly been extended to the citizenry of Castle Caulfield, who have a thriving cross-community horticultural society. Not only do they hold their annual show in the grounds of Parkinore, they have their club, their plots and greenhouses inside the old walled garden of the estate. Bernie McKenna and Harold Armstrong are two of the aristocratic gardeners who are very popular with their colleagues. Bernie brings the buns and Harold the eggs. For Harold, horticulture includes chickens. They provide you lots of eggs, I would imagine.
They do, surely.
Now, do you ever give any to Bernie here to do any of her baking?
Yeah.
You're the famous baker.
Yes, I bake.
And you've a whole lot of them here today as well.
Yes, I've made some buns especially for this afternoon.
Normally you'd be doing that on a Saturday morning,
yes,
isn't that the case?
That's right.
So you spend what, Saturday morning or Friday night doing all your baking in advance or whatever?
Whichever suits, Joe.
Aye.
I might get a better offer on a Friday night, so it might be Saturday morning.
Okay, right. You might get no buns at all, in fact, some of those morning.
We do have some visitors just come especially for Bernie's tea in our buns, you know.
Well, I've heard about them before I saw them, but now that I've actually seen them, I think your reputation is well deserved. I haven't tasted any yet, but I'm waiting.
We'll have to wait to see.
I see, I'm talking about the hens, and I see down the list here of the prizes and the trophies awarded at the Castle Caulfield Horticultural and Vintage Rally. You have a section for eggs. I bet you insisted putting that in there, did you?
Well, no, that actually was there, and maybe that's why there's so many different varieties, because there was classes for different coloured eggs. So Aracanas lay a wee blue egg.
We have a big variety in the show, Joe. It's a great day, and we're trying to appeal to everybody. So people that are not interested in flowers might have hens. So
right, you couldn't have a better place to have a horticultural society, could you? I mean, here you are in the walled garden, a very privileged kind of a backdrop for running something like this.
Harold was the man behind this idea too. Harold knew about this walled garden and insisted we should go into it. Now, we were reluctant participants at the start.
Why would you?
Because it seemed such a daunting task, Joe.
Well, when you arrived here,
yes,
what was it like?
Yes, we arrived, the grass was as tall as I was. And, you know, it looked terrible, but the vision was there, and we started slowly, and...
Well, I have to say, I mean, it's a model of order when you walk into it now.
Well,
it's brilliant.
This is just our third year inside here.
Is that all?
It's third year now, and like we grow plants, and any excess we have, we try and tidy up a wee corner, put in perennials, things like that there, and just add to the whole thing.
We've become wall garden snobs now, Joe. Everywhere we go, we have to see the wall garden to see if ours measured up.
I would say your walled garden, Bernie, beats the rest by several buns.